Hey everyone, welcome to Daily Driven Garage. Today I'm going to be showing you this Mustang COYOTE SWAP New Edge, and I'm going to walk you through all the steps that I took to get the swap done affordably, and I'm going to break down some costs for you guys and just show you guys how I did it, and I hope you like it. So my goal with this build was to have a reliable daily. It originally had the stock 4.6 liter in it. Wasn't enough power, really wanted more out of the car, but I didn't want to go and build the 2-valve into something that ultimately would have more issues in the future. Wanted to build a really reliable car, relatively affordably, and wanted to have lots of power but still reliable as a daily. So I found a good deal on a motor on Facebook Marketplace. Guy was asking 500 bucks, motor was blown. So I drove out like 3 hours. I'm here near Austin, Texas. I drove out like 3 or 4 hours to pick up the engine. It was blown up, had a bad rod bearing. We tore it down in my garage. We put everything new inside of it. I mean, from bearings, brand new crank, brand new bearings, all the way up, new pistons, rings, the whole 9 yards, all new timing components. And we ended up fully rebuilding the engine, and then we started with the rest of the swap. So cost to build this ran me about $1,000. That's for all the parts, gaskets, new head studs, everything to build the engine. So during our test fit, we were looking at fitment on not only engine mounts, but we had to test fit some headers. We had to test fit the K-member and the oil pan. Some people go with a tubular K-member setup on these cars just for this swap because it makes more room for the engine to sit. The Coyote's obviously bigger than the 4.6 liter. I didn't want to go that route because the K-members are relatively expensive and I was trying to do this build on a budget. So what I ended up doing is I bought the COYOTE SWAP oil pan, which was relatively pricey, but caused the engine to fit absolutely perfect with no modification to the K-member at all. It comes with 2 ports on it. One's an oil pressure level sensor, I believe, and the other one, not too sure. It's something on the newer Coyote engines, I don't know. I just put a plug in it from the hardware store, and it's been working just fine. So yeah, and I was able to use the stock 4.6 liter mounts, which was great. I went with a polyurethane setup just because, you know, it helps with vibration and helps with the feel of the car. So as far as header setup, I went with the COYOTE SWAP BBK headers. I had bought another set of headers for this car, but they didn't quite fit right because they were for an automatic. So I went ahead and went back online, bought the right ones. And I'm very, very pleased not only with the sound but performance of the BBK long tube headers. They have worked really well. So on the 99 to 04 Mustang GT, it's a returnless style fuel system. And on these Coyote engines, they require a return style fuel system, which I learned from watching videos of swaps. So basically what I ended up doing is I went the route of the Corvette fuel filter setup, which actually acts as a regulator, keeps the pressure around 50 to 55 PSI, which is what these engines like to run. So I ended up doing that fuel filter. That turned it into a return style fuel system, and I ended up having to get a Mustang fuel pump out of a 1998. Because a 98 Mustang GT was a return style system. So I went with a 98 fuel pump. I bought off Amazon. Don't recommend doing that, but that's the route I went. It's worked out okay. It runs good, no lean codes, anything goofy like that. But I definitely recommend for your swap, put the extra money in, get the good pump. But Amazon fuel pump's working just fine in this car so far. We'll upgrade eventually. I did all steel braided fuel line because you just don't want to have to deal with it if it breaks or if anything goes down the road. So Yeah, that's basically the fuel system summed up. So for the control pack on this car, I went with the Power by the Hour harness kit, just as you buy it online, with a stock tune for this engine. This engine is a 2011 out of a F-150. They put a base F-150 tune on it, which has been okay, but I do need to get it, you know, rest of the way tuned. So yeah, I left all the 4.6 liter box, all the creature features inside still work like they should. Yeah, so basically as far as the ECU, I mounted it over here in the frame underneath my coolant reservoir. It's mounted real clean in the frame. And then my actual fuse box for the 5.0 is behind this fender well. So it's mounted right here to the frame inside this fender. Now you do want to make sure that you run a fender well. Don't ever run without your fender well, because it'll just spit water on all your connections and just make for a complete chaotic mess. So just don't do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as this. I can't quite remember the cost of doing the full, I can't remember what they charged me for the control pack, but I believe it was somewhere around like $2,100. So that was a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, but you gotta do it because you can't really make these engines run without a standalone harness. So as far as the control pack inside, it's relatively self-explanatory. You basically route everything from the fuse box and the computer through the firewall. It comes in, there's really not a lot to do inside as far as hooking everything up. I thought it would be super complicated, but it's really not. It basically needs a key on signal. It needs a crank signal, and a few other things that are relatively self-explanatory. There's a few videos out there that simplify it big time, and those are the ones that I used when I was installing this kit, because I was totally first timer, definitely nervous. One thing I didn't do is I did not extend the harness for the check engine, the OBD2 port. I just left it at the length it was, and I mounted it to my passenger side footwell inside the car. So if you decide to do that with your swap, it's something that can make it easier. If you want to relocate it back to the original side, which is the driver's side up underneath, to each their own on that one. The control pack itself, install, I thought it would be harder. It really wasn't. As far as wiring back to the fuel pump, okay, some people say you need to go wire into the inertia switch. I didn't do all that. I added a ground for my battery to the fuel pump, and I ran the main power feed from the control pack straight to the power on my pump. That allows it to cycle on, cycle off when it needs to. The inertia switch setup just didn't work for me. I tried to make it happen. Didn't make sense to me. So I went ahead and just wired it directly to the fuel pump itself, and it's worked great. I haven't had a single problem with it. Yeah, don't let people freak you out with all the different wiring into this and trying to get you to wire over here. Run that wire straight back into your harness for your fuel pump. I did leave the plug plugged in like originally. That way I would still have my fuel gauge and all that stuff working. So that's how I handled the fuel system wiring as far as the control pack, and it's worked out great. So as far as the control pack goes, it's basically converting the car from a cable pull throttle to an electronic throttle. So you do have to get new pedal. The Scram Speed makes a pedal bracket you have to buy. But with the control pack that I paid all that money for, it came with a pedal, it came with a cold air intake, it came with all the stuff to get the car running, okay? Another main thing that a lot of people don't know about is the O2 sensors. They think you gotta go buy super expensive ones. No, they come in the control pack. It makes it super easy. As far as the pedal, it's amazing, because going from a cable pull pedal to an electronic throttle pedal, super smooth, super responsive. The pedal bracket from Scram Speed, it mounts right in there, and it's absolutely perfect. There's no hassling with fitment. It just goes together like it should. And as far as the accessory drive kit, I went with the full kit from Power by the Hour. It was a little pricey. I think it was about $800 for everything. I could be right, could be wrong on that. But it allowed me to have all of the features like my power steering, my power brakes. I didn't have to go to any electric setup on this engine. It allowed me to have my stock AC, which I was concerned about living in Texas. So that helped out a lot. It's super clean, easy to install. The only thing about it is the alternator. I had to use a newer Mustang alternator for the setup. It mounts on there backwards, which was very confusing on install, but once you figure it out, not too hard. This is part of the bracket kit here. So basically your alternator mounts backwards. It'll come with all the instructions to install the kit. It's very, very helpful and made it way easier for me because, as I said, first time swap, literally doing it in my driveway out of my garage. I was nervous, a little bit in over my head, but with all these parts and accessories from all these great companies, it made it way easier. So the other thing is, it comes with a new mount for the power steering pump, which is over here, and everything so that you can use your stock reservoir and all your stock lines all the way up to your brake booster. Everything works like it should, just like OEM. So yeah, that made it way easier when it comes to doing these kind of swaps. So the cooling systems on these stock 4.6 liters are relatively decent for keeping those engines cool. Obviously, we know a bigger engine needs more cooling. So I went with a triple core radiator from Amazon, which happens to be great. I think they're great. I went with a triple core radiator with dual cooling fans shrouded, which makes a world of difference for getting the heat out of the radiator, or through the radiator, I should say. And they've been great for keeping this car running really cool. These cars, normal operating temp is like 195 to like 210, but I don't like it getting over 200. It just makes me nervous. It makes me feel like something's wrong, especially when idling. So I have a 195 thermostat in it, which is stock. I recommend using the stock one because I went to an aftermarket one, aftermarket thermostat, and it started having issues trying to overheat. So I recommend using the stock 195 degree thermostat, put a little bit bigger radiator in it, help it run cooler. And yeah, the dual fan setup is absolutely perfect. It not only helps with keeping the radiator running cool and the engine running cool, but it also helps with your AC. That's what I did as far as the cooling system on it. I believe this radiator ran me with the fans about 350 bucks. So that's relatively affordable, but I went with the old Amazon special and it's been just fine. And yeah, so that's what I did. So as far as the control pack, it comes with a clutch safety switch, which allows the engine to crank. Without it, it won't. I just wired it in to my existing safety switch on my clutch from the 4.6. Worked perfect. Didn't have to deal with mounting, brackets, anything goofy. So that made it a lot easier. So one thing I had a question about when it comes to doing this swap is transmission, clutch. Was able to use my TR3650 that came in my stock 4.6 liter. And that transmission's been holding out pretty good. I've probably got 5,000 miles on this build or so. And I was able to use my stock 4.6 clutch. Did have to buy a different flywheel because you can't use the flywheel off the 4.6 on the 5.0. I bought a McLeod flywheel. So yeah, I was able to use the stock 4.6 clutch, which I was not sure about. Couldn't find anything on the internet about it, but yes, it will work. And it will hold the 5.0. Not sure for how long. Probably time to put a built clutch in this car, but that's what I did. So on these chassis, the engine doesn't want to go in from the top unless you remove the brake booster and all of the lines related and remove that entirely out of the car. What I found to be easier is to put it in from the bottom. So I dropped the engine and transmission into the K-member with the wheels on it. I lifted the car up in the air with my engine hoist and I rolled the engine under the car. Sounds a lot easier than it was, but at the same time, it stopped me from having to remove a bunch of stuff from the engine bay to make the engine fit down in from the top. So yeah, engine had to go in from the bottom, made it easy, kind of just rolled it up under there, set the car down on the engine. The steering shaft does go through the headers on the BBK setup, which is a little confusing. But if you decide to take this route, you'll understand. It's not too hard going from the bottom. A lot of people don't know that. They think it can just go in from the top. And if you want to take the necessary parts out to do that, you can. I didn't want to. And I wanted to be able to put the trans and the engine in together as one. I did not want to have to put the transmission in after I got the engine in the car. So put them in together in the K-member, rolled them under, set the car down on it, and that's how I did it. So this is the battery setup in the trunk on this car. I have the power wire running from the battery all the way up through the ground, through the door panel. And yeah, the ground runs down. I have one ground coming from the engine all the way back to the battery, and then another ground running down to the frame just to ground the engine. Don't mind my baling wire holding the battery up in the tray. The tray is mounted directly to the floorboard of the trunk. Pretty clean little install, and it's worked just fine for me so far. Now, as far as the exhaust on this car, it has, of course, the BBK long tube, the COYOTE SWAP header. Obviously catless, because who uses cats these days? And it runs directly back to an X pipe, and then to two Super 10 flow masters, which have been my preference since the 4.6. It has MagnaFlow chrome tips, as you can see, which are relatively clean. Give it a nice clean look out the back of the car. So yeah, that's the exhaust setup on it, and now we're gonna fire it up and let you guys hear it. All right, so that's wrapped up. That's my COYOTE swapped New Edge Mustang. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you liked the video. If you do, go ahead and give it a like, maybe subscribe if you're into that. This YouTube channel is gonna be a lot of me working on things, kind of giving you guys tips, tricks for the things that I've learned while working on cars. I'm by no means a professional, so take what I say with a grain of salt. This is just what I've done to get the things that I have working like they do. But obviously use your own judgment. And I hope you enjoy the video. If you have any questions about the build, leave it in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Don't be afraid to let me know what you think.